Call this meeting to order at 6:54 p.m. Yes. And we'll do a roll call vote. And Greg,
Here, yes.
Matt,
Yes, here.
Dorinda,
Here.
Alan,
Present.
and do we have anyone else?
Catherine.
Catherine. And I'm here. Is that a quorum?
Jessica Foot had been trying to get in, and she just sent me a text saying she got the message the meeting was canceled. What was that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, that was because there was a cancellation for one meeting and then an invitation for what we're doing.
All right, let me write to her because she wants to join.
Yeah, I don't think, Greg, do you know if this went to Matt Abrams?
It did, yes. I made sure of
Okay,
it.
great.
Log on. Look for
7.
Greg's.
How many are on our committee in total?
I think 12. So I think we've got 2, 4, 6, 7. We have a quorum.
Okay.
Here's Tupper.
I see that Jane's here too.
Yep.
Okay.
Good, we're getting there. Let me mute myself a minute.
Okay.
Hi, Matt. I'm just checking to see if you were able to log in. This got all screwed up.
So what should I be using today? Help me out.
You should have received an email from Greg Snedeker with an invite, and it just went out a few minutes ago.
Tell them the subject
So I
line.
did receive one from him. Oh, okay. The next one. Okay, just got it. I'll log
Okay,
in now.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, have you run into any Zoom problems lately? That's 3 of us out of this group that have run into some pretty nasty little problems here.
No, I haven't. I usually use Google Meet for work.
Yes, as do we. That's why I'm so unfamiliar with this.
All right, well, we might as well continue because she said that for some reason her cell signal is terrible. She doesn't know why. Are we being hacked?
No, I think Zoom is not working correctly, especially if you've got a work Zoom account and a personal Zoom account.
All right, so Chris is in charge because Michelle sent out a thing finding out that that she had a conflict with the meeting that she wasn't aware of. So if we have a quorum, I guess, Chris, you can take over and start with approval of the minutes.
Sure. Do we want to do a roll call vote on the approval of the minutes?
Yeah, I move
First, we
that
need a motion.
I move that we accept the October 25th 600 Regional District Agreement Subcommittee minutes.
Second.
Let's do a roll call vote. Greg,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Tupper,
Yes.
and Dorinda.
Yes.
I abstain because I wasn't at the meeting. And the next order of business would be in the agenda.
Yeah, so if I can jump in here for a moment, Chris, I think the next item is for Matt to speak to us about the document that he prepared and that I had sent out on this past Friday. It lists the assessment methods that are key to Section 6, and there we decided to focus primarily on the statutory assessment methods, not the alternative ones. And so he's going to go through some terminology to kind of help people get their arms around this, and then walk through the information behind this, and then one of the assessment methods, perhaps the one involving foundation enrollment. So Matt, can I turn this over to you?
And just
You're
a
muted right now. There you go.
Jessica Foote joined us at whatever time it is, at 7:00.
Jay, I made Matt co-host, but Matt, are you sharing, or would you like to share anything on the, as far as the
If you can call up the spreadsheet, well, I should ask Matt, do you want to call up the terminology document that you sent me just a few minutes ago, even though it's last minute? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing, Greg, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
Great.
I made you co-host already, so you should be all set.
Okay, so we figured we'd start tonight just going over some terminology to help with understanding of the data that we've been looking at around the assessments. Once we get a little bit further along in tonight's discussion, we'll be talking about the different metrics that can be used to apportion cost to the different towns. That would be part of a regional agreement. There needs to be some metric that would be in place. Today, that metric is resident enrollment for both of the districts. So we're going to talk about a few options this evening, but before we even get into that, we wanted to cover just some high-level terminology before we start going through numbers. And then just take one step back. We think about last meeting.
He sent it to the group.
Jay, you're not muted.
Yes, and I'm in, and we've started. Yeah.
Jay, can you go on mute, please? Thank you. So last meeting, we did walk through one assessment methodology, and we started with the budget. We got all the way to what each town's assessment would be underneath that methodology. That was just one methodology. And then you'll recall that it was requested of me to put together that same sheet for each of the 6 statutory methodologies that have been discussed as part of this project. So that was done, and that, I believe, was shared with the group last week by Jay. So you should have that information available. What we have on the screen now is basically the same file, but I just added this tab to the beginning. And as Jay mentioned, I shared it with him just a few minutes before this meeting. So he didn't really even have a chance to go over this. But we did discuss that we thought it made sense to go over some of the terminology that's being used, and we'll do that now. So I want to keep this informal. If you have questions, please just stop me, ask them. I don't mind at all. So we have a few to go over. They're in bold. Resident enrollment, I already mentioned that. That's the metric that's used today by both districts to apportion the amount above the minimum. What is resident enrollment? Resident enrollment is the number of students that attend a district schools, also referred to as headcount. So I provided just 2 quick examples here to help. If a student lives in Gill, and I focused on Gill as the town, but it could be any of the towns. If a student lives in Gill and attends Great Falls Middle School, that student does count towards resident enrollment because that is a student that attends one of the district schools. If a student lives in Gill and attends Pioneer Valley Regional School, which is a school that's not part of Gill Montague, via school choice, that student does not count towards resident enrollment. So there's a difference there. Is the student a resident in one of your towns? Is the student sitting in one of your schools? If so, yes, resident enrollment. If that is not true, then that student does not count. Both districts, Gil Montague and Pioneer Valley, use resident enrollment to allocate cost, to allocate the amount above the minimum contribution today. That is part of the regional agreements. Gil Montague does it based on a 1-year look. Pioneer Valley does it based on a 5-year rolling average. And that rolling average is recalculated annually to determine what the updated average is for the new 5-year period in order to use those in the assessments. Any questions on resident enrollment? Okay, so some of the calculations that were done for potential assessment methodologies for a 6-town region were done based on resident enrollment. That was numbers 1 and 2. Number 1 is based on the 1-year enrollment, which is Gil Montague's today. Number 2 is based on Pioneer Valley's, which is the 5-year rolling average.
If I can just jump here quickly, Greg, could you check that the invite went to Mac and Steve? Thank you.
Okay, next term, foundation enrollment. Excuse me. The number of students for which a district is financially responsible. You can also say a town is financially responsible. Students that are included in this count, it's a long list. Resident students, so it includes anyone who's a resident that would be part of the resident enrollment count. Students that choice out. Students that attend charter schools, students that attend collaborative, students that attend residential schools and homeschooled children. Students that attend private schools are not included. So I should say that these are resident students. I don't know if I mentioned that. So that would be students that live in your town that fall into one of these buckets. DSE determines foundation enrollment at the district level and at the community level. So here are the examples again, same examples. If a student lives in Gill and attends Great Falls Middle School, that student does count towards Gill's foundation enrollment number, and it does count towards the district's, Gil Montague's number. If a student lives in Gill but attends Pioneer Valley Regional School via school choice, same thing, that student does count part of foundation enrollment. So students that choice out, that live in your town, they are included in that count. So that can be a pretty significant difference between the foundation enrollment number and the resident enrollment number, because you have these other buckets that are included that are not included in the resident enrollment count.
I'm wondering why can I ask why homeschooled
So
students
it's funny,
are?
when I read that, I actually kind of questioned myself. I'm not sure that should be included. Let's not focus on that one. Maybe that one is not included in the foundation enrollment count.
Yeah, homeschooling's not, it is not.
But the others are. The others
Yes.
definitely are. So my apologies there. I'll fix that right now.
Yeah, homeschool is equivalent to a private school.
Okay, my apologies. Okay. Allocating the amount above the minimum contribution using foundation enrollment, whether it's a 1-year look or a 5-year average, that is an option for an assessment methodology. And that is those two things, the 1-year and the 5-year rolling average, were presented as options, and we'll go over those a little bit more tonight as numbers 7 and 8 as assessment methodologies that were presented. This methodology, meaning using foundation enrollment, presumably captures community's true financial obligation to the district when compared to resident enrollment. So if you think about a financial obligation, or if you think about a financial obligation, foundation enrollment probably captures that better than the resident enrollment piece. So something to keep in mind. Any questions on that?
Can you repeat that last statement?
Yeah,
When you,
so
the rent proceeding, keep that in mind.
foundation enrollment is a count of the students that a district or town is financially responsible for. So I was just saying that if you're using foundation enrollment as the assessment methodology, that presumably better captures a town's financial obligation than using resident enrollment. Okay, minimum local contribution. We covered this a decent amount last time, but I was talking about it. Now we have words in front of us that lay out what it is, what it means. It's an annual amount that is calculated by DESE that represents each community's minimum amount to spend on education. So I'm up here. I'm in the minimum local contribution section right here. Communities can spend greater than that amount. They can spend greater than the minimum local, and I believe most, if not all, do. But they cannot spend less. When I say most, I'm talking statewide. I know that every town, the 6th town in the potential 6th town region does. The minimum local contribution is based on each community's ability to pay. As wealth factors are factored into the calculation, those factors are EQV and total income. And those numbers are updated by DESE in the calculation. EQV is updated every 2 years. Total income is updated every year. So that's a constantly changing thing in the calculation every year. Additionally, foundation enrollment factors into the minimum local contribution, as each community's foundation budget, which is based on foundation enrollment, is used to determine the minimum local contribution. Okay,
Can I raise a point there, please?
Sure.
That sentence is true, I think, so far as it takes into account the famous cap on minimum local contribution. But other than the cap calculation, I don't believe enrollment has anything to do with the minimum local contribution.
Yeah, that's not my understanding. If you use the foundation budget, you're using enrollment. Yeah.
All right, can we keep going?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so next we're moving to the required district contribution. We talked about this a little bit last time. An annual amount calculated by DESE that represents each community's minimum contribution to the district to which it belongs, or districts to which it belongs. For example, Gill, I'm using Gill again as an example, belongs to 2 districts, Gill Montague and Franklin County Tech. Gill has a required district contribution for each of the 2 districts. The total of the 2 required district contributions equals Gill's minimum local contribution. And if I put it in numbers, which is down here, you can see that as a calculation. The top row, this row right here, is Gill's FY25 minimum local contribution. That's at the town level, $1.269 million. The next line down is Gill's required district contribution for Gill Montague, which is just over $1 million. And the next line down is its required district contribution for Franklin County Tech, which is just under $200,000. If you add those 2 numbers together, you get the 1.269 here. Okay, so this is what I was trying to say last time. The required district contribution is always less than or equal to the minimum local contribution, which is at the town level. And just like with foundation enrollment, we are considering required district contribution to be an allocation methodology option. And we have presented 2 options for your consideration as part of the 6 statutory ones that were presented. or provided. We have a 1-year look, which is option 9, and we have a 5-year rolling average, which is option 10. And again, this methodology factors in towns' ability to pay as well as foundation enrollment. So those were the terminology that I thought made sense to start tonight's meeting with. Any questions before we move on?
I would like to just confirm that I understand. I guess the definitions here make sense. I guess what I might be missing, and it's probably just my ignorance, is why would one really benefit over the other? Is that documented or is prescribed about situations relevant to these towns? Which methodology, which of these is better or worse, or things to look out for?
That's in the charts.
Great.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define better or worse, right?
I do have a question
Yes.
or a comment, a criticism. In the foundation enrollment, the way that our children are counted, it means that for every student who chooses to go to another district, we get to pay extra for them because they get counted in here to determine our assessment as a full-time student. And we also get billed $5,000 for them to go to another district. What's fair about that?
And I would echo what Jane has just said. This is Catherine, and because, I mean, if you look at the numbers, for some reason, Leiden has a lot of students who don't go to the district school. So we get hit quite extensively in the foundation, but to me, it feels like we're paying, you know, we're paying multiple times for the same student with the foundation enrollment.
Jane, do you feel that gets ameliorated by having a resident or in-seat count, and then the state factors in the other pieces so it gets captured outside of the assessment to the towns?
You mean if we used actual student count rather than foundation?
Yeah, because that's going to get picked up on another side. Go ahead. I'm just curious if you think that mitigates that somewhat.
Well, yes, because you're not counting them when you're counting the actual students in the resident students in the building or buildings.
All right. Dorinda's
You're counting the individuals that you are educating when you use student body count, whatever term you want to use for it. Those are the people that are in the buildings being educated. And that's what we're paying for. When we go to foundation, we are now also paying for individuals that we are technically responsible for, but that are not attending our schools. And then we're also paying for the ones who choice out. And I don't even want to get into discussing the charter ones because that formula is crazy. But we'd be paying twice for them also.
Yeah, well, so your foundations, you're paying for your foundation students, whether you want to or not. It's all deducted from your Chapter 78. That's how you pay. That's how you pay for charter kids. That's how you pay for outgoing choice. So the foundation number captures that. The head count number doesn't. And maybe that's fair for you, or maybe it's unfair, but we're really just trying to get some definitions straight. Dorinda?
Yeah, it feels like early to talk about this, but you know, I think foundation enrollment is an extremely good idea because we want to incentivize the towns to get children to participate. Like the system that we have now isn't working. It isn't working for our towns. Like our middle and high schools are eroding under this system. So, we want to work together and build up something better and reward towns who are actually sending their kids to that high school.
Well, I
Okay.
think parents are going to choose the school that they feel is going to give their child the best education. And if that means they're going to choice into another district, then that's what they're going to do. It's not going to have anything to do with whether there's a foundation budget or a student count budget.
Well, it does have a bearing on assessment, so why don't we keep moving here, Matt?
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't have brought that up, but it just struck me that here's another example of the state's.
I'm actually glad you did, Jane, and thank you for reminding me of how that works. I kind of forgot that in my time away. All right, let's going forward.
Okay, so I was going to move away from the terminology discussion and then start talking some numbers again at this point.
Right.
So last time we went through this tab, which is the allocation methodology for number 10 is statutory. It's the 5-year rolling average of the required district contribution. Tab has not changed. We decided we were going to focus on 7 and 8 this evening. So I'm
Matt, can I slow you down here though for just a moment? So the first two options are the Gill-Montague assessment method, and then the second one is Pioneer. I might have them mixed up, but those are the two existing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they both use what count of students do they use? I thought they used head count.
Yep. So Gill-Montague is number 1. That is a 1-year resident enrollment.
Yep.
Head count.
Yep. Pioneer's 5.
Number 2 is Pioneer Valley, 5-year rolling average of resident enrollment.
Okay, thank you.
We're ignoring the 4 alternatives, so I'll hide those real quick.
Right.
So now we have 7 and 8, which are the foundation enrollment ones. 7 is 1 year. 8 is a 5-year average. 9 is the 1-year look of required district contribution. And 10 is the 5-year rolling average of required district contribution. Number 10 is the one we went over.
Although it's kind of obvious, Matt, could you just explain the rolling average thing and the benefit of it?
It's whatever's defined in the agreement, but usually what it is you put in a table we'll say required district contribution in this example. The required district contribution for each of the towns for the previous 5 fiscal years than the year you're currently trying to calculate the assessment for. So you basically go 1 year before, and then you take the 4 years before that, total 5 years. You put them in a table, and then you calculate an average using an Excel formula. And
are you averaging the required minimum contribution? That's determined by the state. Why would you be averaging that?
Because it's an option as an assessment methodology. It is an option. There is a district today that I know of that uses that calculation.
I think it might clarify things if I'm right about this. As I understand it, what we're talking about with all of these various assessing formulas is not the assessment that has to do with the foundation budget. It has to do with the amount above the foundation budget that has to be allocated. The cost of the foundation budget is paid by the state and by the district required contributions. That's fixed. And so enrollment, of course, is what fixes the foundation budget. Above the foundation budget, the district's budget has to get allocated. Am I right in saying that, understanding that this is what we're talking about here?
We are talking about how to allocate the amount above the minimum contribution, which I think is what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, well, all right.
This is an assessment methodology to assess anything above the minimum, because the minimum, like you said, is set by the state. The towns are required to pay that. But there are costs that are above and beyond that still need to be factored in. And how do those costs get allocated? That's what we're talking about.
Right. And another way of looking at it, I think, is that the income stream to the district consists of the required local contribution or required district contribution and the Chapter 70 aid.
Yep.
And the amount above all of that that the budget calls for.
That's right.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we're allocating here the amount above the foundation budget. Got it.
Yep.
And we're calculating that based on what?
There are different options that Matt's going to go through. There's different ways to calculate it.
I thought we were calculating it on either head count or foundation enrollment.
Yeah,
That's what determines the percentage.
No.
you can use enrollment, Jane, either head count or foundation, but you can allocate the above minimum in other ways, as Matt just said. You can use EQV, you can use a variety of things. So the last two, 9 and 10, for example, are options that don't allocate by enrollment. Matt, why don't you walk us through one of these?
Okay. And as was just mentioned a few moments ago, Chapter 70 gets factored in, the required district contributions get factored in. We're going to walk through, and we did this last time, we're going to walk through how that calculation takes place. So we're going to focus on 7 to start, and maybe we'll look at 8 real quick. But the layout's the exact same as what we went over last time. The only difference is the percent shares for each of the towns based on, in this case, foundation enrollment. This is a 1-year look at foundation enrollment. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this area right here, walk downward, and then I'm going to quickly pop over to the right to show you how some of these numbers come to be, okay? So in order to determine assessment, you always start with the budget. That's what we have here on line 1, operation budget, $37.8 million. You subtract Chapter 78, which is a common revenue for the district, about $12.2 million. You subtract the required district contribution totals for all the towns. Again, this is set by the state. That equals $12.2 million as well. And you can see that breakdown right here in this table. So these are FY24 numbers, because that's what the numbers were when we put these examples together. Here are the required district contributions for each of the towns. They total $12.2 million. And you can see that 12.2 right here. So that gets subtracted as well. You're also subtracting what we're calling other income, which is basically every other revenue or funding source that's available to the district. And we have totaled those up here in the table up here. So you can see the $2.9 million total here is here as well. So again, real quick, you have your budget. What are the revenues available to the district? Let's take those out of the equation. Let's take out the required district contributions. What are we left with? That's what number 5 is. So you start with $37.8 million, and now you're down to $10.4 million after subtracting those 3 line items. Okay, and as was discussed just a moment ago, something needs to happen with that 10.4. It needs to be allocated to the towns some way. How? How is that going to be allocated to the towns? That's the decision. That's what we're talking about right now. And there are multiple ways to do it. We just covered back on this tab 6 different ways that we've been discussing. 6 different metrics that could be used to allocate to the towns. Okay, that's what we were talking about one moment ago. In this particular
Just some nomenclature, Matt. The stuff on the terminology tab, or our methodologies and the other what is labeled methodologies, I think are better labeled as options, because they have a little bit of contention on the word methodology. Just pointing that out.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we need to allocate the 10.4, and we need to come up with percentage shares that are applicable to each of the towns. So that's what this table is right here. 1 year foundation enrollment. You can see these numbers for each of the towns. That is the foundation enrollment number for FY24, I believe. 1 year look, I believe it's FY24. Okay. And you total them up and you take each town's share of that total. Gill's share is 6.8%. Montague's is 53.3%. And then you can see the rest going left to right. I don't need to read them. Okay, so these percentages right here represent what percent of that $10.4 million is going to be allocated to each of the towns. Okay.
And can I just make the comment of the obvious? And because it's 1 year, you could get spikes, which is why people start looking at 5 average.
That's right.
Yep. So that's a very good point. If someone were to ask me what my preference is, I would always say averaging, just because it does eliminate those spikes that could occur on a year-to-year basis. It gets smoothed out a little bit more. Okay, so here are your percentages. We need to allocate the $10.4 million. That's happening on this row right here. So if we talk about Gill for a second, that $713,000 number represents 6.8% of the $10.4 million. And for Montague's $5.5 million number, that's 53.3% of the $10.4 million. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
With me so far?
Yep.
No, I'm lost. You have a box there that says required district contributions.
Yeah.
Are those numbers included in the calculation?
They are. Yep. So this box right here, this table right here, is each town's required district contribution as set by the state. We total them up, which is this $12.2 million number. And you see that $12.2 million number right here. That gets subtracted out of what needs to be allocated. So that 12.2 reduces this $37.8 million number, along with these other two numbers here, to get to the 10.4. So the 12.2, which is your total required district contributions, is factored in, yes.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So then you just apply those to the amount by percentage of that each town's above.
Yep. So now we've allocated the 10.4. If we go down a little bit further, we need to do the same with transportation. This is just a really quick calculation. Your transportation budget, $1.4 million. We subtract what we have for transportation reimbursement. We're left with $400,000. That number needs to be allocated as well. And we do so using the same percentage shares that were determined up above based on the 1 year foundation enrollment. Excuse me. That gives you these numbers for each of the towns. So again, if we look at the 6.8 for Gill, that's 6.8%. is applied against the $408,000. And that gets you this $27,000 number here for Gill.
Mhm.
So in this table here, we've allocated the amount above the minimum using the percentages up above. In this table here, we've allocated the net transportation costs using the same exact percentages. So now each of these towns has a share of the cost based on 1 year foundation enrollment. And if we go down a little bit further, we need to total up the assessments. And we do so in this table right here. So for Gill, what we're doing is we're adding up the 3 tables right above it. And you can see in the formula, we're grabbing the required district contribution. We're grabbing the amount above the minimum, or the amount above the required district contribution is what I called it here, which is allocated that 10.4 million, that's Gill's share of that. And we're allocating Gill's share of the transportation costs, that 408,000, gives us the total operating assessment under this option, which is this number here, this $1.755 million number. And the same is done for each of the towns. Same exact calculation. You're adding up the 3 things above it. And then what we've done is we've provided what the current assessments are, just so you can do a comparative if you want. Now, again, these assessments are based on the current district setup, right? So it's based on Gill and Montague sharing costs. It's based on Bernardston, Leiden, and Northfield sharing costs. And Warwick is on its own right now. So that needs to be, just kind of in the back of your mind that when you're comparing this table, this is based on a presumed 6-town region. To this table, this is based on current makeup district. And then this bottom table shows you the difference in dollars and in percentage.
Okay.
Matt, I wonder if it'd be interesting. So this was the 1-year foundation option, if I can use that word, and maybe we could go through perhaps a little faster because people have a sense of this now. If we could go through the foundation averaging.
Yep.
I think, Jay, for the sake of time, it's the only explanation here is just how the averaging works, and after that, it's the same procedure.
The calculations at the start are the same. You're right. So if people want to see the comparison with 5-year, that's here. That's the thing I wanted to.
Yeah.
Yep.
cover.
So the only difference is this table here in
Yep.
the percent shares.
Right.
Yep. So just looking real quick, if we did a quick comparative of the tab we were just at, Gill's foundation enrollment is 120 if it's a 1-year look, but it's 132 if it's a 5-year look. And then Montague's is 936 if it's a 1-year look. It's 995 if it's a 5-year look. So we're looking 5 years in the past here. So it's going to bring those numbers up a little bit if enrollment's been dropping.
Right.
And you can see that here. The total is 1842 with the 5-year average. It's 1757 with the 1 year.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
Okay, so everything else is the same. It's just different percent shares. And then down at the bottom, you have the comparative if you wanted to look at it.
One just note, if we turn things around in a 6-town and enrollment starts coming up, it's interesting how that then helps to smooth the average more to avoid spikes because you're going in the other direction.
Yeah, it'll smooth it out both ways. You're right, Alan. Yeah.
But what we're smoothing out is the proportion, the proportional allocation, not
Right.
like
Right.
Right. Exactly. What it
Yeah,
gets
so-
applied to.
if every town goes up by the same percentage, you wouldn't see a change in how things are allocated.
Okay. Is there any interest in seeing either the 9 or 10th option, or do people want to look at that on their own?
What are they?
We
What
had
are
them. sent-
Why don't you, Matt, why don't you explain that briefly?
Okay, so we can go back to here. 9 is this one listed right here. The metric used is 1 year of required district contribution. So that would be 1 year, which is FY24 in this case. Those numbers are provided by the state. And 10 is the 5-year average of the required district contribution. So that would be averaging 5 years, FY24, and then the 4 years that precede that.
And is there a recommendation now on the table as to which method of assessment?
No, there really isn't. I mean, I'll make a comment, and others are welcome to do the same. The one point, which some of this is, I think, obvious, is to not just search for the most beneficial number for your town, but to think about what's best for a new region in the long term. That might be one suggestion. And the other thought we had was that you're using enrollment, understanding that it's headcount, not foundation, but we were wondering if, because you're using an enrollment factor and looking at and how above minimum is distributed, you may want to continue to use an enrollment factor. It's less of a change, shall we say. I guess the third point I'd make, and last one, is that, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, using enrollment as a factor for allocating the above minimum is, at least to my mind, about distributing the cost based on the number of kids you're sending to the district, and understanding that there's a difference between foundation and headcount. You're using kids as a way to distribute the cost. And if you use the required district contribution option, there's more of an ability to pay factor that's built into it. So those were just some of our impressions as we talked with Matt and looked at the data.
Yeah, okay.
Matt, is that generally something you go along with, or because please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, when you get towards the required district, you're correct. You're getting more towards the ability to pay and less away from the enrollment. Yep.
Yeah.
I was muted. Yeah, it was a good summary, Jay.
Thank you.
That was good. And could I add to it an additional thought, and that is that one of the most fundamental principles of the whole education funding system in Massachusetts is that the payment by the citizens in the towns is not based on enrollment. It's based on the ability to pay. The whole foundation budget is funded on that principle, and the state, of course, picks up the remaining amount on a 41%, 59% split. And so I'm wondering whether the rest of the budget shouldn't follow the same principle. That the idea is, of course, is that public education is a public good, and we don't ask towns to pay for the number of students they have. We ask them to contribute to the secondary education in the state based on their ability to pay. And I'm wondering why it should be different for the amounts above the foundation budget. I think there could be arguments for that, but I'm just curious if that inconsistency has been discussed.
Well, I'm not sure it's an inconsistency, but it's certainly an option, and I agree with you that the ability to pay concept is deeply embedded in how Chapter 70 is distributed. Matt, can you, because the things jump around a little bit, can you go to the bottom of the 5-year required distribution comparison? In other words, the bottom of number 10, the option 10. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Can you just walk through the bottom of it from line 5 there? The amount is still the same, 10.4.
Here?
Yeah.
Sure. So, well, I'm going to go up a little bit more here. So everything's the same on this tab as well, except the difference would be in this table here. This is where you see your 5-year average of required district contribution. So the metric used is actually a dollar amount in this case, rather than the enrollment numbers that we were looking at prior. These numbers are set by the state and you average over a 5-year period. The percentages are calculated just as the same as they were. And one thing that kind of stands out to me immediately was when we were looking at the other one, Montague was up in the 53-54% range, and this one is down below that, down below
Right.
50%.
That's what I mean about how these things change. Yeah.
Right. But that's what the calculation, that's what it spits out. So that's here. So then the required district contributions are the same. Those haven't changed. Those are set by the state. The amount above is based on the percentage shares of the $10.4 million. So Gill in this case, 902,000 is 8.6% of the 10.4. Montague's number of about $4.9 million is 46.9% of the $10.4 million. So on and so forth. And then transportation costs, same thing, using the percentages on this row. And when we get down here, we total up the 3. And we compare to current assessments. Again, that's based on current district setup. So it's not exactly apples to apples to compare them, but we are still comparing them. And then you see the changes down the bottom table in both dollars and percentages.
So Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gill goes up significantly in this because of the aggregate wealth calculation within Chapter 70, the EQV plus income, correct?
Yeah, I believe that's a fair thing to say, Greg.
Okay.
Well, yeah, compared to the number of students.
Right.
If you have a small number of students and then you shift to the other method,
right,
then it goes up.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
As a Gill representative, I should have shut up, huh?
I know. I was kind of wondering why you were talking, Tupper, but that's all right.
So I think we're all saying a lot of the same things here, and indulge my ignorance. But the difference between including enrollment or not is how we're going to blend, the ability to pay. So let me just confirm: required district contribution set by the state, and the methodology of which the state uses is one on the town's ability to pay. So if we're using the methodologies in 9 and 10, we're not including enrollment in that fact. We're not factoring in enrollment whatsoever. Where if we are, we're trying to say that a specific town's allocation can go up or down depending on how many students they have in the system. And then there's whether or not those students are choicing out is another small detail. Do I have that right?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that when they do the aggregate wealth calculation within the formula, that it's also population driven. So, that's why, just because a town has a high ability to pay, if its population is lower, they're not going to all of a sudden start paying more than a town that's 2 or 3 times the size of it, right? And then you have the cap that comes into play too, which is what So at some point they cap the local contribution.
If I could say something, one of the things I found that a lot of times towns, if they're paying for their students, they feel comfortable with that. Am I paying for the students in my town? They feel more comfortable with that. When you're trying to do it with the foundation, with the minimum required contributions, it's based on just how rich your town is. And I think that's what you were saying, Greg.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing to keep in mind is that aggregate wealth calculation per town is already sort of embedded in the first part of the calculation. So this is above minimum. So, it's a way to sort of even things out a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yep.
There are some of these options, their suitability sort of in some cases depends, and this kind of speaks to what Steve was saying, to what kind of communities are members of the region, because that differs. And I'm not trying to sell one thing or the other, but I do this business of being comfortable about the concept of paying by the number of students you send to the district. It's familiar, it's easy to understand, and it has some history with how the two districts now do their budgeting. So those are important things to think about.
Yeah, and I
I
think
think,
the
yeah,
interesting thing is that if you look at the resident enrollment, the two enrollments that I see that are the least sort of disruptive coming from the respective districts into a larger district is methodology 2 and methodology 8, which are, I think it was the pioneer resident methodology that they were using, and then we have the foundation enrollment, which is the one we looked at previously. So, I mean, I think both of those are good models, and I tend to lean towards the foundation 5-year average.
Yeah, so both of those were enrollment driven and they both used averaging, right, Greg?
yeah.
We're going to have to sell this to the towns.
Yes, which is,
And I think the foundation formula is easier to explain. I think moving to methodology 10, there's going to be a lot of glazed over eyes that are going to say, I don't understand that. I don't know what they're trying to push down my throat. I'm going to vote no.
I agree with you, Jane. I
Well,
agree with you.
And especially Gill and Leiden, who get hit pretty dramatically with increases from the previous year. So, I mean, I know it's, you want to be looking holistically, down the road as terms of a new district, but I also think, asking Gill and Leiden to take a, 16 and almost a 20% increase from the last year over what they were already paying. Gill, I can see ways if we're going up 6% and everybody else is going down, just, my being in the town, I can think of ways that we could backfill that 6% and politically get that over the finish line. So, I don't see that as too heavy a lift. And the other ones fall. So I think that, most people would see that as a benefit.
no, I think those are all good points.
Yeah.
Jane's point about how this needs to be understood by voters, I think is really key. And
Well, then don't show
also,
them this spreadsheet, just to be frank. I think all of the dollar amounts on here are a huge distraction from what this exercise is really about, which is one of proportion and percentage.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
But I was just going to add that the larger context is if in forming a new district, you're asking voters to embrace a lot of change already. So if the budget process is somewhat familiar, maybe that's also something of an advantage.
Now, the interesting thing is the unfairness to this is really falls with the state and now they're doing some of this. So, our task is to figure out, because I agree with whatever one we're going to bring forward for the full planning board to consider would be the one, whatever is decided, that would go before, in a regional agreement to be presented by the towns. They would not have all this menu to have to try to digest and figure out what's best. And familiarity in this case is more of our friend than not. I don't know that I don't like particularly foundation and the way that they're doing it, but I think that 8 seems to maybe fit
Well, foundation to
what we're
me
trying to do.
feels like that it's representing the number of what would be true if school choice wasn't as prevalent as it was. Am I
Mhm.
wrong with that? It's kind of like what a
Mhm.
district should support under normal
Mhm.
circumstances. Catherine has her hand up.
Thank you, Chris. I think I just wanted to add that in our conversation with Pioneer Valley, they recently they also spoke about foundation, the foundation enrollment approach. And I think that I agree with everyone about, we're familiar with that, number of students that, we hear it all the time in Leiden. What, we've got $1 million to pay for, 50 students or something like that. I mean, constantly. But I mean, in the end, they would understand that. They would understand that if we could explain, that how Chapter 78 offsets a little bit of that, foundation, enrollment
Right.
average. But well, I mean, because not just keeping Leiden in mind, because we're impacted quite a bit in these scenarios for our size of our town, but that this could happen to any of the towns. And I also have some concerns that school choice is going to increase, not decrease. And that's going to mean even lesser students. And Dorinda, before when you said, you got to make the district attractive and people, and get the town needs to get people to go to the school. Well, that I don't know what role the town could have in getting people to make a choice about where their children go to school. So just some comments on my part. Thank you.
Could I just add to that? I think one of the things that helps parents and people to make a choice is if they actually have AP courses and middle school sports and the things that we identified in all our research that would really make a strong district. And I think you'd have parents that I have heard that feel, not all, but some that support this idea that their child wasn't prepared for community college or didn't feel that they were getting the education that they should have, so they pulled them out. And I'm sure there are parents that feel otherwise, but I don't know. I don't know if we want to, how you want to do this in terms of, do you want to try to have a consensus, Jay, around
Well, I think
methodology? And if you do, I'd
what I'm
recommend one.
thinking about is that I mean, we are getting towards the end of our meeting time, but I'm thinking that I'm hearing some consensus about the foundation options.
Mhm.
And so I think we put that, there's some stuff we didn't get to today, which is my fault. Again, I apologize for the Zoom mix-up. But we need to do some house cleaning about section 4 and 5. But I would think that we put the foundation options up there at the next meeting and ask for a vote, and and also try to get tentative approval on section 5. There's some minor edits with section 4 due to some rethinking that Mac and I have done, and also a couple of points that Tupper made, but they're not major, they're minor. So yeah, so I would suggest we focus on the 2 foundation options at the next meeting.
So Jay, we sort of did that. I'm wondering if you want to test the waters to see if we do have a consensus at this
If you
point.
people want to vote, yeah, if you want to do a tentative vote on the
So-
5-year
I
foundation.
would make a motion to use methodology 8.
I'll second.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Bryn,
And
Do we need a roll call vote, or is that
just
Yep.
for further discussion, I just want to thank Matt. Matt, this is one of I'll say it again in this meeting, that it's just one of the best sort of breakdowns of
Mhm.
assessment methodologies I've seen. You should go on tour to all the other districts do this, because it's really, you did a really wonderful job here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Guess
I
you want to
agree.
do a vote then?
Yes, I'll support Greg's comments as well, even though that I was criticizing the formatting of this document. Um, So yeah, we'll do a roll call vote, and we'll start with Matt Lord.
Excuse me, this is the 5-year rolling average on the foundation enrollment, is that right?
Tentative approval of using that methodology.
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
That's number 8.
Yeah.
So one more time, Matt Lord,
Aye.
Alan,
Yes.
Greg,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Tupper,
Yes,
Dorinda,
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
I vote yes.
And I see that Michelle joined us, and she's very up to date on this. She's been on the committee for Heart, and she's been on the Pioneer and this one. Michelle, we're looking at the foundation 5-year enrollment average.
Yep, I did see it. And when Matt put it up, I came in. Yes, I'll vote yes.
Okay.
And I'll
Great.
vote yes too,
Thank you,
Jessica.
Jess. Thank you, Jess. Oh, we missed you.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't see you there. Okay. Does anybody want to move to adjourn?
Well, can we just one thing before you do, just as a wrap up? Can you make the screen so we can see everybody again? All I'm looking at is 3 people. Yeah, there we go. We're all here. So we have the 11th? Is that the correct date? Because I thought it was the 13th. It is the 11th for our next meeting.
That was my
That's-
understanding. If people want to correct me, go ahead.
No, I just want to make sure, because I guess I was here writing something.
December 13th would be a Friday.
Oh, then it was the 11th. Okay. And Jay, we've already had, it looked like number 5 was just a couple minor things. So I don't think that's going to take very long at all. And I like your suggestion about moving all that to the other section, the bottom of that. So that should go pretty quickly, I would think. And 6, I didn't see a lot of discussion on that. I could be wrong, but I think you could probably maybe add another piece to the next agenda. And if we get to it, that'd be great. But
Yeah,
I
I
think we
think
could go quickly.
Yeah, with this tentative approval vote, I think we can edit section 6 and section 5 to match what people have agreed to here, and we ought to be able to get through the budget section and start looking at section 7. Yeah,
Yeah. So people can at least have a peek at section 7 too.
yeah.
That'd be great. I want to thank everyone for coming into this meeting.
Greg, one housekeeping thing is that Kathy didn't get the invite, so could you please send her the recording? You're muted. I hope you heard me. Yeah.
So
I
So
did.
Chris,
Sorry, she's not on my DRAS, group.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, thank you for your help. We're
I'll
lucky to
send-
have a meeting.
I will send her the link tomorrow. I'll upload it.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And Greg, would you add Steve and me, also Steve Heaven and me?
Yes,
Under-
I apologize for that. I should have sent that right out to you guys. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you.
So Chris, if you're still looking for a motion, then I would make the motion that we adjourn unless you want to have something else.
I second the motion. Greg,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Matt Lord,
Yes.
Dorinda,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
Tupper.
yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our consultants. See you later.